Well, how are you? Oh, now I don't hear you.
Oh, how about now?
Yep, I hear you
Is
now.
it okay?
Yep.
Okay. Let me just make sure the audio is okay. All right. So, how was your day?
My day's been good. My day's been good. What day is today? Today
Today is
is
Monday, the first.
Monday. Boy,
Yeah.
it's been crazy week for me. I had 2 funerals last week.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. And so I had Sunday, Monday I had a funeral, and then Saturday I had a funeral, then Sunday. So today's Monday. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah,
been
two weekends. Yeah.
yeah, it's been
Okay.
a little busy, but I don't funerals, not that I want people to die, but funerals are
Yeah.
times when people can be serious about things. So there's so yeah, funerals are often meaningful times, I'll say.
Gotcha.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I am 27. I'm a software engineer. I currently live in Chicago. I work for a healthcare startup, so mostly like I'm in development. But I mean, that's kind of starting to look to change careers a little bit. Maybe a lateral move, but doing something different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually saw your video yesterday, or today actually. You released it today. It was quite good. It was an hour long, like a prep.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like sometimes I feel like you have too much stuff to talk about because each little thing, right? You can expand on it like forever.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's actually why I like your videos too. They're just very like thought provoking. It allows you to kind of like dig deeper into like these other concepts and ideas that I'm kind of in a way maybe obsessed with, like, just like, oh, there's this book, you got to read it. So then you go look for that book and you read it.
Yep.
And then it's like now my bookcase is like filled with books now that I haven't read. So I just need to like get on that, but it's just too many. Like, yeah.
Well, I've exploded a lot of people's bookshelves, and
Yeah, for
maybe
sure.
maybe bit by bit, folks will catch up. So, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm trying to catch up. Yeah,
It's just what I do. So you found me through Jordan Peterson videos?
I did, and I found Jordan Peterson through Joe Rogan. Actually,
Oh,
I
okay.
actually watched a lot of Joe Rogan's podcast, and then I saw Jordan Peterson, and that was very interesting because it's like I had a lot of questions growing up, right, and they were never answered in a sense like properly or even in a way that made sense to me, really. Like I've always been kind of contrarian, right? So I don't really like like mainstream thinking. I like eccentric people who think differently, who do things like extraordinarily, right? But it's like you never really are given the answer, right? Like, and that's what I really like about Jordan Peterson. He kind of doesn't give you the answer, but he kind of gives you a direction. Yeah, and I really like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what area of his work did you find most helpful?
Psychology, actually, like human psychology, human behavior. I really like. I was watching his personality lectures, and they were really good because I took psychology in college, but it was like surface level. Like, okay, read this book, and yeah, here are some primary sources, but you don't have to read them. Just
Yeah.
do whatever you need to do for the test. So I actually studied physics in college, and so I wasn't like a computer science major or anything, but I ended up going to software engineering. But I mean, I liked physics because it kind of gave you a lot of good answers. Also, well, I mean, like I was pretty good at math, and like I was like dead set on becoming a physicist. or whatever, but that didn't turn out so well in college because you realize that what you think you like, right, in the future, it's not exactly what you're good at or what you enjoy. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Well,
but yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's true about college psychology. I had college psychology courses, and
Yeah.
they turned wine to water, and then you get on and you listen to Jordan Peterson. You think, boy, if I had a psych prof like that,
exactly,
it would
yeah,
have been totally different. Not to say it. I don't know if any of my old psych
yeah.
profs. I think most of them are dead, but no offense. But yeah, watching Jordan Peterson, I think I never had a psych class like that.
Yeah, I've had a lot of great teachers, like growing up, like in high school and college. But yeah, Jordan Peterson is kind of like a different animal. Like he really, there's just so much content. Honestly, it's like you don't have to go to his office hours to like listen to him, tell you something profound, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I like. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah. I actually wrote a lot of notes that I kind of wanted to talk about, but like seeing your previous videos with the other guys where I think it was like, I wrote them down, like Brendan and Luke, they kind of just like went with it,
Yeah.
So, and I've kind of already had like this conversation in my head like 10 times with you, actually. So
really?
I'm just gonna.
I haven't had it once.
Yeah. No, what I mean is that like I'm pretty introverted, so I think about things like a lot, and yeah, it's as if I've had conversations with you in my head, but of course they're never like.
Uh-oh, you're froze.
How it is in
now you're
real life, right?
Good.
So I'm just gonna try not to like too much. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you just froze momentarily.
Yeah,
well, what do you got on your list? What are some general areas you're interested in?
I'm interested in a lot of things. I mean, like just watching Jordan Peterson, that introduced me to a lot of different ideas, like a lot of philosophers I've never really like looked at, or like even like the general idea of like philosophy, that people can disagree on these very fundamental things that are essentially like the tools we use to interpret the world, and that they do change how you look at the world. Like I'm totally different after all this exploration, right? But I mean, like one of the first things on my list, I think I wrote down some stuff on that calendar, but
yep.
You can forget about that because it's really not like.
That's all right.
I mean, there might be some stuff I touch on, but it's like it was too short, anyways, to really, talk about things. But one of the things I was kind of that I was interested in, but also kind of bothered me because it's like most people are not ready to have the kind of conversations that are put out, like on YouTube or just like political or philosophical, because they don't have the vocabulary or they don't have the breadth knowledge, right, to kind of like even touch on it. And it's really strange because like they take a lot of shortcuts when they think about things. Like I've been looking at some controversial figures in history, and there's some modern ones today, of course, right, like Trump and Henry Kissinger and like Steve Bannon, right? They're all like even Dick Cheney, right? And they're all, people view them as evil or like criminals or like these political enemies of the United States or something, right? But when you listen to them, they just have a different view of the world, right? And like you can learn a lot from them.
Mm-hmm.
But people will say, I mean, this is one thing about Jordan Peterson as well, right? Is that people will say, listening to them is like listening to Hitler or something, or like they're not ready to have a conversation about taking someone's ideas like not seriously, but just even like considering them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, what do you think about that?
I think when people use a line like, listening to them as listening to Hitler. They usually, that's kind of a rhetorical device to dismiss a person's perspective. That doesn't mean that the person's perspective that they want to dismiss is right or wrong, but it's not helpful, especially if, I appreciated Jordan Peterson's appearance on the Bill Maher show when, everyone was just kind of, beating on Trump. And Peterson said, yeah, but half of the people in the country voted for him. And you think what you want about Trump, but and a good number of those people, some of them voted for him. A good number of those people voted against your tribe. And these are the people you share a country with. These are the people that are voting and paying taxes and serving in the army and serving in the government. And so at some point, you're going to have to sit down and actually live with these people. And as a pastor, people like to imagine these big tribes out there. But for example, in C.S. Lewis had this book, The Great Divorce. And in the book opens in a city where you can have anything you want just by thinking of it. And you think, boy, that sounds like heaven. And the city is this massive city that just keeps growing out and out because people keep building bigger and bigger houses. But what they're doing is getting away from each other because they can only get along with people who think just like them. But I don't care. Two people decide to marry each other and they stand up at an altar and say, I'll love you for the rest of my life. And a few years later, that's the person in the world they can't stand the most, even if they have so much in common. So there's something about us like that. And so if, it's really important to, all right, so you want to dismiss someone and call them a Hitler. All right. But that's actually a pretty lazy approach to differences.
Right. I think what's interesting as well, like in addition to people calling someone else that, is that it's also a tactic to dissuade people from listening to them, right?
Oh yes.
Dissuade other people.
Yep.
And that's very counterproductive, right? Like, but I mean,
it is, and I think obviously a lot of that was done to Peterson a number of months ago when he first kind of peaked, and then all these news outlets, well, let's label him in a certain way, and out there in the normal world, when I might mention Jordan Peterson, oh, he's
right,
transphobic, or he's misogynist, and I'm thinking, have you listened to the guy? No, but okay, that's.
Yeah, I'm not even that vocal about it. Like none of my friends even know that I listen to them. So.
Well, if I put this up, maybe it'll be on the internet for the world to see.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. I was afraid that it'll go viral or something because I'll have to listen to my voice, right? And that'll really suck. So, yeah.
Well, the way my videos go viral, you're probably pretty safe.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple thousand people will see it, but in the great scheme of things, it ain't much.
Yeah. I've actually been not necessarily a part of, but I've seen a lot of YouTubers, rise, right? They go from 1,000 subscribers to 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. And it's very interesting because it's, what they have in common is that they just kind of do it out of love and not out of fame and sometimes it's out of obsession, right? It's oh, I got to do this because it's, I like doing this and no one's stopping me. So, yeah. And that's always really cool because it shows you that, it's that they're really having fun doing it. And I think that's how YouTube should be, right? It's if someone wants to, speak up or, give their piece, right? They should be able to just say what they want to say. Yeah.
I agree. I wouldn't do this if I wasn't having fun.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised anybody watches. I mean, that to me was the big shock.
Oh, you kind of changed my mind about pastors, actually. So that was a good thing. Yeah, that was a good
Oh,
thing.
good. I'm glad, because
Yeah,
pastors are people. They're
yeah.
just people.
Like my dad is actually a pastor.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yes, yes. He's well, I mean, we were first um like I don't even know, like probably Methodist or something at the beginning, and then he now pastors at a Baptist church. But like you say, he's like a what did you call it? Like has two jobs or
Oh,
something,
bivocational.
bivocational. Yeah. So it's it's whatever. Like I stopped going to church when I was a bit younger, but he's always been in church. And I mean, like something interesting about that though is like, like my parents are not from the United States. Like my parents immigrated from Laos, although we're not Laotian or whatever, like minority group. But it was interesting because like when they first came to the United States, of course they didn't really have a community, right? Like, when you live in the old country or in Southeast Asia, your community is the village,
Mm-hmm.
and you have like your extended family and their extended family and so on, and in different villages. So then coming to the United States, it's kind of like it was all disjointed, right? Like where do you build a community? And so of course the people who actually sponsors like these immigrants are usually churches, right? Like the Lutheran churches
Yep.
in the 70s and 80s. But it was interesting to really like think about it, like especially for my grandmother, right? Like a person who grew up in Laos who didn't have very much money, and like where did she find her place in the world, right? Like where does she find her spot where she can be useful, or especially if you can't speak English, if you're like already 50, So that was just kind of interesting to kind of like um, introspect,
That's really interesting, especially with a transition as big, I would imagine, as Laos to the United States. That's a big cultural jump,
Yeah,
especially if you grew up in a village and then come to maybe Chicago or a major city in the United States. Yeah, yeah. Even the Christian Reformed Church that I grew up in, it's a church made up mostly of Dutch immigrants, and they were coming from a developed country, to a developed country. But even so, they clustered together in churches, and they clung to those churches, and they built their Christian schools, and they stuck to their own as much as they could just to
right.
somehow weather that immigrant shock. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like the whole like cultural divide is pretty huge too.
Yeah.
Like people don't really understand it if they're not part of it. Yeah.
A lot of the traveling I was doing in the last few weeks was to part of my denomination visiting Korean classes, which are groups of churches in Southern California. And, on one hand, you've got the pain of the immigrant shock when you come in, but then you begin to realize your children are growing up American. And they've still got some of they got some of the culture, but in those immigrant communities, and it's much more than it was, say, in the late 19th century when my family came over, or even, the early 20th century, because now you come into a major metropolitan area, the culture is so strong. In the
Yeah.
CRC, you just had your church, you dealt with people maybe in the business world, but there was no TV, maybe a radio. Now, boom, it's just all open.
Yeah. It's like entirely like the culture like surrounds you, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, that was one thing about like Christianity too that people don't really understand is that you're surrounded by all these Christian traditions, all these like cultural touchstones, right?
Yeah.
That you're not even aware of, really.
Yeah.
Like the idea that, I mean, this is common among like all cultures, but like the idea that fidelity is a very, or like breaking fidelity is a very taboo thing, right? And I mean, it's interesting too because like it's it's something that's culturally like taboo, but then everyone does it. It would seem as though the words and the actions are very different from each other, right? Yeah. And I guess when Jordan Peterson says like he acts as though he believes in God, he must like follow that. He acts in that way, right?
That's right.
Where he takes the commandment, like, thou shalt not commit adultery, right? He takes it to heart, or like in his actions, which is interesting because like that's, I think you said it before. It's like the only times that it matter are when it comes up, right? Like you can, there's no power in following that rule until that happens.
That's
Yeah.
right. Until there's the opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Because thou shalt not commit adultery is an easy rule to follow if there's never an opportunity. I've never done it. Well, good for you. But when an opportunity arises, well, then you're tested. No,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's true. It's very true.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting. Like, people will just think it's a bunch of rules or something, but it's like it's when it matters that you embody this thing, right?
And when and even if I've seen this experience too, if people have, say, left the church and they're just kind of going along, and then something happens, and then suddenly all of that stuff that they were raised in gets energized, and then suddenly, oh, now I understand my parents. Now I understand the importance of that. And as a kid, you don't know because you're just a kid.
Yeah.
But as life goes on, you begin to think, oh, wow, there's something there.
Yeah, I was shocked actually when I heard from my friends when they've all said that they have either been cheated on or had cheated on someone else.
Yeah.
And that was a big shock to me because you grow up thinking that, wow, people don't do that, or that it's it's not Christian like or whatever.
Yeah.
But then it's so I guess for them it was just so easy to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and people are complicated, and the statistics are, nearly 50%, which is a huge statistic.
Yeah, and they're not bad people or like unlikable people either.
No,
it's like,
no.
It's like they feel like they don't belong in this relationship, so they just date someone else.
Yeah.
They're in. Yeah.
Yeah. Because to get out of the present relationship would be, horrendously costly and painful. So I'll maintain this over here and keep this on the side. And to be honest, thinking back in terms of my professional world, I haven't had a lot of adulteries in my church.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like so my coworker actually challenged me on this, but it's like my Christian friends actually, so I've like kind of separated groups of friends.
Yeah.
I have not heard that so much on their side.
Yeah.
It's mostly my more agnostic, like, atheist friends. Yeah.
Well, I think there is something.
It is what it is.
And Peterson mentioned it, even though he doesn't go to church, but he mentioned it, that there is something, and it's not just you're hearing the rule, or that it's a rule in the community. It's that these norms get embodied in the community, and generally speaking, if someone has an affair, they're out of the church, because they might find another church, but it's just, you've broken trust with not just your nuclear family, but your entire community. And so everybody understands that at a deep level. And so that is that power of accountability. And I mean, and here's the thing about sin and temptation. Yeah, part of it's opportunity, but part of it is consequence. And if if you violate that norm and the consequence is severe, doesn't mean it never happens, but it does mean it gives you a little bit more support to do what you say you want to do.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't want to sound as though I'm like putting it on Christianity as though that's like the thing that's going to save you from that. But I think, I mean, there's this, maybe it like has to do with like a temperament as well, you know, like
Oh yeah.
people who are
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
virtuous perhaps are more like drawn to Christianity or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, that might not be true either. Like, I don't know what exactly is like people's motives to do things. But I mean, it's good to just have it like outlined, right? Like it's kind of like I don't know. There's like this riddle, like, you know, speak and I appear or something, and then it's kind of like that. It's like once it exists as a, you know, like if you have like a mathematical um like a preposition or a proposition or something, right? Well, once you have a theorem, right, then that's proven for all time, and it's kind of like um yeah, it's kind of like once it's there, right, then you can see it and you can say, okay, this is true and this is not true, or something. Kind of like adultery is bad or something.
It's people are so complicated. Of course, I've known people who committed adultery, married their, you know, uh, that's unusual. Most of the people that I know that have committed adultery didn't wind up sticking with the lover nor the wife, and
Oh, really?
had everything blow up, and it was a mess. And then they'd pick up someone else down later, and maybe they learned from their mistakes, maybe they didn't. But the truth about sin too is that once you do it once, it's easier to do the second time. You know how to do it. You've created the neural pathways, and we're complicated creatures. We really are.
Yeah. Oh, it's almost 30 minutes, and I feel like I haven't even touched on the thing I actually wanted to talk about, because this
Well,
was not even.
I got 15
Yeah.
more minutes, so
Okay.
15 more. I don't have someone after you, so we can do another 15
Okay.
minutes.
Did you have someone before me?
Yes.
Like just the chat? Okay.
Yeah, this is my third
Cool.
chat today, and
Okay.
and
Excellent.
we'll see if the other ones get posted. What I usually do is I'll send you a copy, and then you can tell me, unless you want to tell me at the end of it, yeah, go ahead and post it, then I'll post it. Otherwise, I'll send you a copy, and you can decide, and I'll post it if you want to.
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, depends how it goes, right?
Yeah,
But
that's
I feel
fine.
like if you feel like it's a good chat, then I
Oh,
feel like
I think it's been good so far. And again,
okay.
this is, I mean, I told one of the other guys today, I backed into this. I mean, I've always found people interesting. And so I love talking to people, but I didn't think anybody else would care to watch. So
Yeah.
who
No,
knew?
they're great videos. Like I didn't understand that like pastors could know so much philosophy, you know, like, or because usually when you go to like a regular church or something, the guy is just reading off of the book, or he has a sermon that's prepared, right? And it talk about Saint Augustine or Aquinas, or even like, you know, like John Stuart Mill or like John Locke, David Hume, people who have like profound, you know, insights about the human condition, right? So I mean, that's like that's very helpful for me, you know.
Well, thank you. So what's the big thing on your list?
I have a lot of stuff. Let me find one that's actually good. Let's see. Well, I mean, you know, I really like your analysis of Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. Actually, I think they're very good. Like they're very long too, which is
Yeah, they're very long.
And you know, there's just so much stuff. Like there's sometimes I feel like sometimes I feel like you're straw manning Sam Harris too much.
Okay.
Although you do have a lot of great points, and I'm sure like Sam is aware of like a lot of his biases or his like his understanding of like human nature and things like that. But of course, I mean, I think you're also right that he is generally flawed in his I guess, assessment of what people believe and how they get to that point, right? I think Jordan Peterson is much more on the mark. I think he has the right idea that there are these like a priori structures, as you like to say, yeah, that are kind of like that are there that actually, you know, get you to that point of religion, right? It's not as though like religion is something that kind of just appears like like what appears without a history, you know, like nothing does, right? It's like our bodies or our skeletal system, our neural system is, you know, something that, you know, is carried on throughout evolution, right? So it's very hard to say, like even these memes like religion, that they can just like disappear. Although I mean, I guess some things do disappear, but it's hard to say that, you know, something just won't come in and take its place, you know. But I think you yesterday, or it might have been a few days ago, when you had like a talk with Luke, you were talking about how Sam Harris kind of like thinks that the world can be free of conflict, right? Or that if everyone's just rational, then everything will be fun and good, and everyone will act rationally and virtuously. Of course, I don't think he believes that, but I also don't think you're wrong, or Luke is wrong either. I think Sam thinks it's too easy of a project to get there.
I'd be curious to sit down with him and his wife and say, how rational is this relationship?
Yeah. Perhaps, yeah.
I'd say, Sam,
I don't think it's very rational, yeah.
Let me see how that reason works on your wife. And I'm not saying anything about women. I'm just saying, like I said earlier, two people get close and boy, that's when you see stuff.
Yeah, it is irrational. It's like, you know, there's no reason why you should put yourself before someone else, right? That's I guess, you know, not economically rational, not necessarily like the best thing to do, right? In any like game theoretical situation either. So.
Well, there's so many. Part of the difficulty with rationality is that not only are there so many potential goals, or like the video I made today, potential ends that you might be seeking, but there are also so many nuances to circumstance. So to put someone else ahead of you, well, that might make a lot of sense if it's your child. Well, how about if it's someone else's child? And then, so what's the goal? Is it the preservation of the species? Is it the preservation of our tribe? Is it the, you know, the world is just so complex and rich.
Yes.
That then to say, well, this is the rational choice. Well, but like I said before, rationality is more like a chain than, you know, like a globe. And so
I thought about that
together.
Right. I thought about that a lot, actually, how you said rationality is about self-consistency, right? And like another way to say it is like rationality is just like a tautology where all you have to do is take one statement and then try to like figure out, okay, how can this statement be equal or something?
Yep.
And there's like a lot of a lot of things in rationality that can't, you know, this is like a idea by Hayek where you just can't have all the information, you know, like of something. Like in the marketplace, you can't coordinate all the actions that happen, so you don't know exactly what's going to be the result of all these individual actions. So you kind of just like let it be, right? In a sense, don't try to like manage it. But but his you know, his thesis comes directly from this idea of like, okay, there's not enough information to know, so you're not supposed to like fidget with like these variables because it's going to affect other variables. And you know, maybe that's kind of like Jordan Peterson's idea as well, because like like how I see it is that, Sam kind of doesn't like, in my opinion, he doesn't really get Jordan Peterson's ideas, like, or his argument, because you can look at these two arguments and say, okay, they're just equivalent. They're trying to, they're saying the same thing, or they're saying things that are minutely different, but they're very different. Because Jordan Peterson is much more like it's gonna happen, and just let it be, right? Like, this is human nature. It's gonna develop religion. But Sam is like, no, you can like control humans in a sense, or control human nature, and like religion is just one cancer we can scrape out or something, which is very different, right? Like, it's completely different.
It's part of the difficulty with Harris is that his definition of religion, I think, is overly narrow. And I don't think that, so if you define religion,
definition is a hard thing.
It's a very hard thing to define.
Yeah.
But if you say, well, religion is only a response we have to supernatural beings, well, then, in terms of our secular society, yeah, we've pushed a lot of it out of the public square, but it just keeps leaking in.
Yeah, keeps evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps evolving. And then even and I also have problems with the natural supernatural distinction. I understand the distinction, but I don't think that's how people actually function. Because and I think Harris and Peterson basically say that at a point in the videos where we don't know where fiction comes from. You sit down and I think about a hobbit and a hobbit hole.
Yeah.
And then there are dwarves and there's a wizard.
Sure.
And, Tolkien's making up stories for his kids, and it just starts to take on a life of its own. Well, where does this come from? And that's where Jung and other psychologists say, there's patterns.
Yeah.
Maybe something's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Jung, I think Jordan Peterson and you also talked about a book called Answers to Job, about, and I was starting to read it, but I'm still kind of reading it, but it's kind of like intermittent. And it's quite a good book. It has a lot of very difficult words like I haven't seen before, so that's really good. To be like introduced to these ideas and like Latin words and stuff. But it's very cool because he talks about a unconscious God becoming conscious in a sense. And that was kind of interesting because, like in Genesis or so, God is more like this force nature, and he only really has presence in the presence of a human, right? Or like a human being. Although I'm not sure you're the theologist that knows this. I don't really know it,
Well, I haven't read Answers for Job, so I haven't read much Jung, and I have to read more and more of it, but I'm learning it slowly. There's just so much on my learning list that
I know. Yeah.
Some people are really annoyed by me because you need to read more Jung. Oh, okay, I probably will, and I'm interested, but it's just going to take time. And if I'm making an hour video every day, there's limited.
Yeah, I understand. That's why I use like audiobooks, so like I can use my Discover time.
Yep. No, I do the same thing. I do the same thing.
Mm. Yeah, but Answer to Job is actually kind of a short book. It's like probably less than 100 pages.
Oh, okay.
But but it's just kind of difficult to read though, because he goes through a lot of concepts. Yeah, but it's quite good. It's like he talks about. I mean, like I think he covers the things that people are or things that people have question about. The Book of Job. Why did God do this? Why did he have a wager with Satan? And why did he not essentially apologize to Job at the very end, right?
Yeah.
After doing everything.
Yeah.
And
now you've piqued my interest. Now I'm going to go out and buy it. See, you've accomplished what a whole bunch of Jung fans have failed to. So you.
Yeah,
maybe
it's really good.
You Patreon.
Yeah. I think Jung just has a really nice way of like analyzing
Hmm.
this idea that it was like a shift in thinking, a shift in the Jewish people and how they viewed like the natural force of a monotheistic God, right? That it can take a life of its own or something, where it's not just this what's the word? Not just like a counselor or like a person who guides, but someone who can actually act on its own accord in a way where you don't like like your Sherpa, right, is going to be a Sherpa because he's going to get you to the mountain or something. Well, I mean, this is like a shift to like, okay, this guy's by himself and he just goes up the mountain or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
You're really piquing my interest. I have to get this book now.
Yeah, it's a hard book though. Yeah.
But no, that's because Job is such a fascinating book. And part of why I was doing so I have my YouTube channel, then my church channel, and I've been doing Old Testament prophets. Those prophets Christians don't pay hardly any attention to them except around the holidays. But
Yeah.
if you spend time working through the story of Israel and in just the slow motion disaster that it was, and track what they're doing in terms of God and the Baals, and then God, and what does God say, and what is God doing? It's really an incredible thing. And I think Christians would benefit. I think Christians would benefit from reading the Bible.
Yeah. Well, reading it as literature in a way, right?
Yes. Well, when I was in seminary, that was one of the real. So Robert Alter, who these are two of his books. And I'm going to put more books on your shelf. But he teaches. He's pretty old now, I think, but he taught at Berkeley. And when I was in seminary, I remember reading Robert Alter, and it was like, boom. Oh, all of this stuff that I never understood about the Bible, Robert Alter just kind of lays it out and says, this is what's going on. It's like, oh, now suddenly the book is coming alive, and now it's getting fun. So
there's a lot of interesting things about the Bible for sure. Yeah.
Oh, there is. It is a fascinating book. Well, if one of the conversations I had today was a guy who's been horribly sick, and he had some amazing experiences, and then he decided he was going to read the Bible, and he he said, I'm going to read it through cover to cover. That is no small thing, but it is an amazing book, and and that's one of the points that Peterson keeps making to Harris that Harris doesn't seem to get. Peterson is making the point that this book has captivated human history in a way that no other book is even a close second. There's something about that is not so easily dismissed as, this is Iron Age bullcrap.
Yeah.
No, you really, there's more going on there. Now, you might not believe it's inspired, you might not believe it's special, but there is something unique about that book in all of human history. And if you want,
definitely, yeah.
And I'm surprised and disappointed that you would think that anybody getting a BA in just about anything would have to take a course on the Bible just to learn what's in it, because it's so foundational in all of Western civilization. But we don't do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like there's this, I guess this sort of, what do you call it, like the subtitle, like the great conversation, right, throughout history.
Yep.
It includes all the classics, all the what do they call it in the great books or something? Yeah, it's very interesting because you compare that with other literature, right, like Iliad or like Odyssey, or the Aeneid, and it's like, yeah, they were written in kind of the same way where they were supposed to be spoken, right? Like, and it's like, yeah, that's really changed over history.
Yeah,
sure. And that's
Yeah.
why they're verses, right? Easier to remember and things like
Yep.
that.
And I think not only is there a crime in universities not teaching it, I think the bigger crime is that you go to a lot of churches and you can go to a church all your life and you won't know much of anything about the Bible.
Oh
And
yeah, for sure.
I
That
don't,
was me. Yeah.
yeah. And I don't mean that you don't know Bible trivia. Most
Mhm.
people won't get that, but that
Yeah.
you won't have a sense of how is this book put together? How are these stories? I mean, there's so much to learn about this book, but churches seem, well, we want to get busy with all kinds of other foolishness. I mean, you would hope that if you wanted to learn the Bible, you could go to a church and you would learn the Bible. But boy, I'll tell you, you would have a hard time picking a church that would really be helpful in terms of getting to know this. So that's one of the things that, with what I do as a pastor is and I know sometimes my people complain, it's like, well, but it's no, you should know this book. And that should be one of the main things we do. So
Yeah.
that's how I feel, at least. Well, I've got a skedaddle. I got to run home
Yeah.
and I got to take a phone call. But it
Mhm.
was great talking to you, Michael.
Yes. Same here. Same here,
And
Paul.
and best wishes to you. And
Mhm.
who knows? So let me know if I'll send you a copy of it, and you can let me know if you'd like to post it. I'd be happy to post it. And
Sure. Yeah. I'll take a look. Yeah.
okay, real good.
All
Thank you,
right.
Michael.
Thanks, Juan. Yep.
Have a good evening.
You too. All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.